Welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. I'm Lori Groh, your host, mental health therapist, and practice owner. Each month, we'll showcase a central theme and provide weekly practical hacks, inspiring interviews, and valuable advice from wellness professionals. Our aim is to help you streamline your wellness and mental health journey. So let's start the show. Hi, welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lori Groh, and our guest today is Jason Lange. And Jason is a facilitator and occasional filmmaker, passionate about the intersection of media, technology, and human development. And he works primarily with men's groups and truly believes every man should be in a man's group. So I'm so excited to talk with you today, Jason. Do you want to share just a brief story of what led you to this particular area? Because it's unique.
Absolutely. Yeah. Excited to be here. So thank you, first off.
Yeah.
And like a lot of guys I know in this space, my journey to becoming a men's guide and facilitator just started with the work I needed to do on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually grew up just outside Chicago there in the Midwest, white guy, lower middle class, pretty much had all my basic security needs met, but was raised in a family that had no sense of interiority, just no physical connection and no emotional connection. And, when I was young, I just survived like all of us do, and then start to hit adolescence and come out into the world. And particularly for me, when I hit puberty, and in my case, I'm attracted to women, I started to find wow, I don't know how to do this. I was really awkward and nervous, got really uncomfortable in my body, and just started to find that there was a lot of dis-ease in my being, meaning I just often did not feel good and had no idea how to connect, like how to open myself up, share what I wanted, even identify what I was feeling a lot of the times. And the pain of that drove me essentially to okay, there's got to be something I can do to change myself.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of men, for me, it first started philosophically. So I started getting into philosophy and trying to understand about the mind. And just through some luck, honestly, eventually got thrown into a path that exposed me to two things: somatic therapy and men's groups, which completely transformed my life. So the first time I had a very big opening in my life was in one of the first men's groups I was with. It was being facilitated by an incredible older man mentor who had been doing work for a long time. And, I thought I knew myself pretty well and had done some talk therapy and was pretty sophisticated, let's just say, in terms of my protection, of how I kind of protected what was going on inside me. And within 10 minutes of this guy, I was on my back, arms up in the air, saying, hold me, bawling like a 2-year-old with my voice just cracking.
Wow.
And crying in a way I'd never cried before. And came out of that and was like, what just happened? Whoa.
Right.
What was that? I didn't even know that was in me. And turns out that had been showing up, that part of me, that young boy, had been showing up in every interaction I had had with women. And that pretty much sold me on that kind of work. And then I got really lucky because in my 20s, I got exposed to men's work and men's groups, which back then, there was a little movement in the 90s, but it was not huge. And most of the time, if you said men's group back then, it would have been referring, most people would know, as like a church group, which can be really great and powerful.
Yeah.
But it's a little different than the type of work that's emerging in a lot of men's work now. And so in my 20s, I got plugged into a group that was a mix of men my age, older men, and out of all of the things I've done long-term, it's what's transformed my life the most. And there was a point where I was just talking about it so much and how much it was helping me and got me through some really challenging transitions and life choices. I was kind of becoming an evangelist, and guys kept asking me, well, can I come to your group? Can I come to your group? And at the time, one of the guys in my group was a therapist in LA, and we were just meeting in his office. So it was like, no, we can't fit more than 8 bodies. It doesn't work. And so that kind of inspired me to, all right, well, I wonder what would happen here if I started leading this work and giving some men the opportunity I had. And that kind of just sold me on the path and got me on a trajectory that's just been growing ever since.
Wow.
And then simultaneously, in the culture, there's kind of been, I would say, a bit of a tidal wave of, wow, men are suffering and they are unequipped.
Yeah.
They're just often unequipped to deal with their interiors. And that has a lot of ramifications on our society. And so men's work is starting to take off in an exciting way. And men's groups are starting to become a little bit more of the culture in terms of one of the many tools available for men to heal and thrive.
Yeah, I feel like I can feel that movement. And I tend to work with older men usually. And it is really interesting because there was no real tool. There wasn't really any tools, right? It's that age old, men can feel lust and they can feel anger, and that's about it.
Yep.
And it's interesting also because I have a 13-year-old boy and I get to be with all of his friends and all of that. And we live kind of in the country, I would say, to describe our area. And there are some of those same kind of beliefs in our community of, I will hear from his friends like men don't cry and stereotypes like that. And I think, man, that would be so difficult to move through life and feel like you can only express two emotions. You have to figure out how to suppress or push down any sadness. And how do you actually engage with people? You can only do it at a certain level. There is going to be a lack of genuine connection. So it's challenging, I will say, raising that 13-year-old boy who doesn't necessarily gravitate towards, Mom, I want to lay down and cry, or come towards me. That's not actually his personality. So I'm even more interested also in, some ways to get young men to start to feel okay with that. Do you have any insights, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that's a thankfully blossoming part of the men's work movement. We kind of classify that under rites of passage, in that traditionally in most cultures around the world, there were rites of passage rituals which involved taking boys and initiating them into manhood, which, obviously it changed throughout different cultures around the world. But a lot of times, boys and girls were raised together until, 10 to 14 years old. And then at some point, the boys would separate and they would go spend time with the older men and kind of learn the ways of older men. And, that had problems because there was all kinds of, issues with masculinity back in the day. But part of what we're seeing is kind of, I would say, the more modern version of that, like you said, one of the huge challenges most men I work with, and particularly boys, have is they have no role modeling for the other way.
Yeah.
Right? Our culture is just constantly pushing the macho man, lone wolf, tough, rugged cowboy, American, I don't need anything. I never share anything kind of stoicism. And so they don't even know that there is another possibility. But like I experienced, the other part of that first men's group I was in where I had that experience, which, I was like 25. So it's kind of funny to say this, but I'm sitting there and I'm watching this facilitator, this older man who was in his 60s at the time. And this thought comes through my head of, oh, that's what I want to be like when I'm older. And it wasn't in the sense of, oh, this is specifically his job necessarily. It was feeling his presence, how attuned he was, how present in the moment he was, how deeply he was feeling, the way he moved through the space. His actual nervous system relaxed my nervous system. And I was like, whatever it is he has done to get there, I want some of that.
Yeah.
And this is one of the great things I see in men's groups over and over again is when that transmission happens that men didn't even know that was possible. So two very clear areas I often see that are when a man comes forward with some grief or sadness, but is still like fully present. Tears might be streaming down his face, but he's like solid at the same time. Men have this experience of, whoa, I didn't know that was possible. Like, in fact, feeling this man's tears, he feels stronger to me.
Right.
I trust him more that he has the capacity to be with his whole self. Or on the vice versa, the tricky one of anger, right, which often is one of the only emotions men are allowed. And then there's this whole subset of men that culturally were raised by that, either had abusive fathers, bullies in their peer groups, that then see the anger and fully retract that energy into kind of the nice guy of just, I don't speak up for myself, I'm always appeasing other people, and who have kind of slotted anger as, confused it with aggression as a dangerous emotion. And for them to see a man who's fully in his anger or rage, but who isn't explosive or dangerous, meaning, wow, anger is something that can be brought forward and still be safe.
Yeah.
So many men have never had the experience of that. And they're like, holy crap, like I felt that man's fury and never once did I feel threatened or in danger. He has control of that. And so it's that experience and that modeling of, oh, there's another way here that is so key, that these rites of passage, in particular for young boys to kind of bring it back, are so important because they get to see and have modeled for them this other way that is very counter to the culture. But what I've seen is once men and boys experience it, they realize, oh, actually, that's what I want. That's way easier than spending, I'm sure you've seen with some of the older clients, 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years of a man avoiding some emotional experience inside, and the immense amounts of energy that takes from someone's life versus being able to just move towards that in the moment liberates so much, I've seen, for guys.
I think going into what you're saying of that energy of what that does to someone's body, that's something I can say I've seen. I've seen older men come into my office and it's almost like a slumped down. And then as they're moving through our work, how open and how their body just, you can see it. You can see that change. And, my life is so different now because I accessed some of these things. I can talk about some of these things, maybe not all of the things yet, but I have an opportunity to actually feel understood and to feel connected in a way that, maybe they've never experienced before. It's a gift. And it's also, how you described it as something that can be passed on generation after generation.
Yes, totally.
Kind of going into that space of being present, that nervous system being calm and being able to express those emotions. I just want to point out, I can feel that solid presence and vulnerability just in how we're talking today. So, you work with a lot of different men's groups. What do you see as something that somebody tends to come in for or come and seek you out? Are there specific things, either their goals or what they're looking to get out of that time?
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, because of so much of the existing stigma that men tend to live under of never ask for help and, therapy and groups are only for men who are really messed up, like all this junk that a lot of guys believe. A lot of times guys only get to me when they're in an extraordinarily painful moment of their life.
Yeah.
Their wife is leaving them. They lost their job. They're having a major physical ailment that they can't just push through, that something is actually demanding that, hey, you can't do this alone anymore. Or for some guys, just extreme isolation and loneliness. They're just like, I'm dying inside and I have no one. But I will say one of the areas I do focus on is on relationships, whether that's dating or marriage, because often that's a place where you just can't avoid it. And in some sense, it's one of the only things I've often found gets men off the couch and says, hey, I need help. I'm not able to get into the relationship I want, or I'm in a relationship and they're ready to leave because I'm not able to bring something that they're really desiring. So that's a really, really big one. Other men who, are just burnt out. They got on the escalator of life of, okay, what I'm supposed to do is get a really high paying job, work many hours a week. And that's what I'm supposed to do for myself and for my family. And then 10 or 20 years go by and they're a wreck.
Yeah.
Right? They miss their kids' childhood. They haven't taken care of their body. Their relationship is totally on edge. And they realize, I got to tend this system
Mm-hmm.
because I can't just run on autopilot anymore. And in fact, I don't even know what I want because I haven't stopped to think about that in 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so I'll get a lot of those guys as well. But really, it's the whole gamut of men who are just tired of feeling stuck and tired of feeling alone and who are ready to just make a change and get connected to other guys,
Yeah.
And really shift the paradigm of other men don't have to be just a threat or your competition, but the right group of men can be amongst the deepest allies you have in life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of men are kind of tired of that going on, even in their friends groups of
Yes.
like the constant kind of alpha stuff that shows up of, taking each other down and, some of it's in fun, some of it feels like it's not, and feeling like, oh, I'm not really getting what I need out of these friendships. And I kind of want more, but I don't know how to do that. And I think you covered all of the areas I see happening, which is relationships. A lot of times when I'm working with a couple, the man might be in that position of just not even sure where to start or what to do.
Yeah.
My wife is saying she's been feeling alone for the last 10 years, and I don't really understand. There isn't really that roadmap for how to be connected.
Absolutely not. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the many struggles I see, and I'm sure you probably see it too, is so from a young age, most boys who then become men are not really taught how to be in their bodies and how to connect to their emotions. So right from a young age, not all boys, but plenty of boys, and some girls too, let's be honest, but hear that phrase, stop crying.
Right.
You're okay. You're fine. Which from a young age is really teaching boys what's happening in your body. Ignore it. Override it with your head. And then a lot of boys get put into school, which has a lot of great things, but just the way boys' hormone profiles are, they need to move.
Yeah.
They have very kinesthetic bodies, but sit still. Don't move. Again, what's happening in your body, ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get to adolescence where there's, all that kind of locker room machismo.
Oh, yeah.
Don't show any weakness or vulnerability because it's going to be wielded against you. Hold it inside,
Yep.
Whatever's happening. Ignore it. Get out into the workforce. What does it mean to be successful? Just work harder. 60, 70, 80 hours a week, whatever it takes. Oh, is it destroying your body? That's okay. Just work harder. And yet we still have interiors as men. We still have feelings, right? And so most men aren't taught, A, how to identify them and know even what's happening inside, let alone how to express it and work with it. And because of that, what do then men often do? We turn to things outside of ourselves to change our state when we're feeling uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one in our culture, alcohol, weed, sex, porn, masturbation, food, overworking. And so men try to fix themselves in a sense, get a little bit of relief, but those things are always just temporary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't actually get to the root of it. And that causes so many issues with so many guys I know who are like, I keep doing this thing and I don't want to be. Like I see how it's hurting me in my life. And generally what I see is men go inside and learn to access this and then particularly get connected. A lot of the need for that starts to evaporate in terms of, oh, okay, maybe I don't have to drink my feelings away.
Right, right. You know that feeling when you meet someone and within 5 minutes, you just know you could talk to them for hours? Actually, that's one of my hiring requirements at Shoreside Therapies. All of our therapists are highly educated, experienced, specialized in all sorts of different areas. But the real test is, can I imagine sitting with them for an awkwardly long road trip? As a self-proclaimed awkward introvert myself, I've realized how important this is. Finding the therapist isn't just about credentials. It's about feeling comfortable enough to show up as yourself. The good, the bad, the I just cried watching a dog commercial version of you. And that's why I'm so picky about who joins our team. The best part, our biggest referral source is our own clients. So that means people aren't just getting the support they need. They love their therapist so much, they send their friends, family, and even their dog walker to us. So if you're looking for a therapist, who not only knows their stuff, but also feels like a real person, then check us out. Shoreside Therapies, where therapy is real, human, and maybe even a little fun. Yes, it can be fun sometimes. I'm curious to just be married to a man. There are some things that come up for me of sometimes forgetting that he has feelings and thinking he can kind of handle anything that I might say, or, oh, he's not going to be affected by anything. And I'm very curious too, as men are in your groups and they're learning different tools and learning how to interact and connect more to their significant others. Do they ever find that that part is then challenging because, let's just use heterosexual couple where the wife thinks or partner thinks, I want you to be more vulnerable, but I actually don't know what to do with it when it shows
Totally.
up.
Yeah. I think this is a very common problem that a lot of women in hetero relationships, they want to feel their man more, but then if he comes forward with vulnerability, they don't know what to do with it. And while I can't speak to every situation, what I often see contributes to that is because of this paradigm of I can't share deeply with men in my life. For some guys, the only place they kind of feel safe bringing any vulnerability forward is with their intimate partner. And that has a time and place, and that is a very important skill and capacity. I think what I've seen sometimes make wives or feminine partners a little uncomfortable is when they get the sense they're the only one holding that with their man. Meaning, wow, he is like so stressed about his job or depressed or scared. So I have to like hold that with him now, which can often change the dynamics of the relationship a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of call it, if it happens too much, it's kind of like mother-lover syndrome where it's like, I don't want to be your mother, right? I want to be your lover.
Yep.
So I want some of that, but I don't want to be the only one that's kind of tending your well-being. What I see often change the paradigm and actually make it feel a lot more comfortable, frankly, for partners to feel a man's vulnerability is when he's plugged in to a network of other people who are holding that with him. I remember there was a classic moment in my marriage where when I was first becoming a men's coach, I rather unskillfully kind of burned the bridges with my previous work. It was like, I'm going all in. And it didn't go well. It took a lot more work than I thought. Spent like a year digging myself into debt, was getting really stressed. And when I get stressed, I withdraw inside. So I was like leaving my wife hanging. We weren't talking much. She could tell it was getting really bad. She was getting scared. And thankfully, I'd been doing enough work. And she's kind of like, I'm scared. Like, what's the plan? We want to have a family and I don't feel safe right now doing that. And, I took a moment, kind of had been working with my guys. And I just looked her in the eye and I was like, I'm at a place right now where I just feel like I'm losing in everything. And I want to be winning. And it really hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with my men on making a plan to get myself out of this. And her whole nervous system just relaxed. She knew exactly what was going on for me. And I wasn't asking her to fix it. I was just letting her into my world. And then we kind of were able to come back together as an example of that. The other thing I often see that is so kind of magical about the peer relationships men can have is they don't need anything from each other. Because we're not in intimate relationship, there's no like, oh my God, like if I share this, what's going to happen? There's just men loving on men like, hey, I don't need anything from you and you're in pain. And I've been in that pain before. And sometimes that alone totally changes something from a man when he's like, oh my God, I'm at a place in my life where I don't even want to get up in the morning. I can barely get out of bed and I just feel awful. And when another man puts his arm around him, is like, yeah, man, I've been there. I know that. That in itself can be so healing for guys to just realize, oh, I'm not alone. And actually I can talk about this because this guy's been there. But it is, it's a skill and I would say a capacity that men can build of, how do we share our vulnerability without, it's maybe a little harsh, totally collapsing in the process. So there's a way to still hold ourselves and be vulnerable and let our partners in so they can just know us and feel us and connect us. And it liberates a lot of energy. And, I say this goes both ways too. Part of what I love about my wife is she's plugged into a support network that isn't just me. We both have our own therapists, our own groups, our own peers holding us while we're holding each other. And that makes a huge difference.
That's such a great example of how it can work and how it can be such a positive aspect of being in the group and being able to share. But neither person in that is expecting the one to take it all.
Exactly.
And I think that's also part of a common dynamic is for the female in that relationship to believe that they have to take on all of the emotional stuff that their partner has.
So totally.
And, I think it can be even bigger than that. I think then a woman's nervous system is getting off track too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of statistics on marriage and what it does to women. And I think if we can figure out how to change that dynamic, maybe at the beginning, but as long as we're working on it, it's a good thing. But that's where I see a lot of issues or problems coming up in about like the 40 to 50-year-old stage of life, where let's again use hetero of a man maybe thinking I should be in this spot or I have all this stuff and I'm not feeling how I expect it to feel. And the woman is potentially in a spot of I'm doing all the things and I'm not feeling how I'm supposed to feel.
Yeah.
And not necessarily realizing that the problem might actually be bigger than just the couple and that it might be really important to get that extra support of other people.
Absolutely.
Of, hey, I can't do this alone, but we're expected to do this all alone. So having that place that men can do that is extremely beneficial. Yeah. So question on how do you run the groups? What's kind of the logistical format of how you do it? Is it online, in person? Can you share with our audience a little bit about how that all works?
Yeah, there's, the wild thing about a men's group is kind of like the term meditation. If someone's like, hey, I meditate. It's like, well, what kind? There's endless varieties. The same is kind of true of, there's lots of varieties of men's groups, but a few core things that I tend to focus on are one, I have in-person groups and I have virtual groups. One of the nice things about this kind of technology coming online is it really does make it way more accessible for guys, no matter where they're located. Mm-hmm. I was pretty lucky. I lived in my 20s. I got into my first men's groups in Boulder, Colorado, which is kind of this hippie, very transformative. So the work was there, but lots of other places around the country, there isn't. Right? There's nowhere to go for that kind of group.
Right.
But this whole virtual wave we've been part of this last decade has really changed that. So if you're hungry as a man, no matter where you live, you can get into a group. And while, I have a special place in my heart for physical in-person groups because there's just so much you can connect with guys when you have that physicality, it has been mind-blowing to me how effective a virtual group can be.
Yeah.
Just in terms of men getting connected and sharing and being true. And, for some guys who are, in the middle of family life and stuff, it's actually quite convenient.
Yeah.
That, I can squeeze in an hour and a half without having to leave home and put my kids to bed, et cetera. So I do both. And to take a meta step back, I would say conceptually, the biggest shift in a men's group, like whatever you do inside of it, is the challenge a lot of guys have in why they might have a lot of friends, might be going to sports games together, hanging out at the bar, but then they come home and they're still feeling lonely inside, is because most of us men are taught to relate through triangulation. So me and you have our attention on a third thing, and that's where our connection comes from.
Yeah.
Watching the game, fixing a car, going fishing, wherever that is. So we can spend all of this time with each other, but not actually be talking to each other in a sense. And at its most basic, a men's group is just when we shift our attention onto each other.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on in your life right now? Where are you in pain? Where are you struggling? Where are you thriving? What are you excited for? What's in the way? What's it like to be you in your life right now? And that alone is totally transformative for so many guys. And while a lot of men don't have necessarily a lot of practice sharing, what I've seen to a shocking degree is once they get into a space where they feel safe, wow, there's a lot to come out about what's going on in their marriage, with their job, with their kids, their health, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
But then a little more granularity, just a very simple structure I often lead or teach men is that we get together and then we do a little bit of practice. So we do some kind of embodiment practice to just become more present and actually get into our bodies. So every man just gets a few minutes to kind of share where they're at in their life, in their body right now, coming into the group, what might be a big issue or not. And then we'll often go deeper with a couple of men where they really get the focused attention of a group and get feedback and get sharing and sometimes get practices, meaning they get assignments from each other of like, yeah, you need to actually go home and have that conversation with your wife because, it's not going to fix itself.
Right.
Or, yeah, it's time to go into work and you got to let them know you have to set some boundaries. You can't be taking calls at 10 p.m. on a Saturday when you're with your family, right?
Yeah.
And there's that loving kind of accountability and challenge that helps men move forward.
Yeah.
And then we'll often have some kind of closing. That's like a very basic structure I use. Other groups are a little more accountability focused. Some groups I'm in we're literally just getting together to practice with each other, doing meditation or embodiment work or just really focusing on getting present with each other. So again, there's a lot of variations. Some are just more traditional kind of support groups where everyone's just sharing, where they're in pain. But the best ones have a little bit of everything, I've found. And the thing I've seen time and time again about why joining a group can be so profound for guys is most men I know are craving a deep sense of belonging and a deep sense of purpose in their lives. Mm-hmm. And when they join a group, it can start to give them both.
Right.
Because they feel belonging. Your presence actually matters. If you're at a group or not, you might have something that could be very valuable for another man. And then there's purpose in that too of, wow, I want to show up for my guys, right? This is something that really bonds a lot of men. And then just kind of gives them something to orient around.
Yeah.
And as I say, I'm in a group that meets every other week in person. And it's kind of like a heartbeat in my life where every 2 weeks, I know I'm going to be slowing down and checking in, like really getting honest about what's going on in my life. And it keeps me on track in a lot of beautiful and profound ways.
Yeah, I believe it. I think Lizzie, we had talked before meeting with you and she had that question. So I think you really explained quite well what somebody could expect and what are those benefits. And even that how quickly things can shift when a man is feeling safe and comfortable. And really it has to do a lot with, it sounds like, being connected to yourself, being connected to the other men in the group, feeling that purpose and support. A lot of guy groups that are just friendship groups, they're not usually talking about the tough things. Or there might be like, hey, my buddy's going through a hard time and they're going to go have a drink together. They're going to go do something together. I love how you explain that because I didn't really think about that there's a lot of benefits to having an activity, but it can be a buffer, not needing to be too close. Or if there's any emotional uncomfortableness, it's my turn to hit the ball, So that can be helpful and useful sometimes, but having that like, hey, we're here, we're in it, no pool table, and let's just be here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, A lot of guys find it pretty revelatory.
Yeah, I bet. So Jason, how can people go about finding you? Could you share your information? I'll also put that in the show notes, but yeah, could you share that?
Yeah, happy to. So best way to keep up with me, if you're kind of like what you're hearing and want to learn more, is my website, which is just evolutionary.men. So it's not .com, but .men. And on there, you can see the different programs and events I run. I have a podcast of my own, lots of different content and material of just really kind of pushing back against this kind of man box culture of, hey, the lone wolf thing, it doesn't work. Like, we got to get real here. And, I always joke with guys like, literally in nature, the lone wolf is the one that was kicked out of the pack and it will die faster.
Yeah.
It actually will die faster. So getting community online is one of the most powerful tools to becoming more resilient. I've seen for guys where suddenly if life comes at them hard with something, they have a place to go to recover and to kind of find themselves again. And I've had many moments in my life where I've had to hit the bat dial, the red alert phone of, wow, I'm in a crisis right now. Who can come help? And it's those guys that show up in my life in the moments that matter the most.
Yeah.
So if you're a guy listening, and you're intrigued, you can definitely learn more on my site. And if you want help finding a group, I love doing that as well because I'm very plugged in at this point. So you can always contact me and I can kind of get you on the right path to finding something local, whether it's with me or not.
Oh, I love that too. I love that where somebody can reach out, and if you can't offer that support they're looking for, that you have all these connections to help someone get there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jason.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for creating the space and doing the work you both do with men. It's so needed.
It's so needed. And I'll put all your information and your podcast, I'll link it all up to the show notes so anybody that's listening can connect to you there. All right. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Quick favor, subscribe and rate the podcast to help us bring you more expert guests, transformative conversations, and valuable resources. Your support makes all the difference. And don't miss out. Big things are happening. Join the Mindful Advocacy Book Club, kicking off April 17th at 12 p.m. CST. Our first book, Hope in Darkness, is free on Amazon right now. Go ahead and click that link in the show notes. Plus, you get access to exclusive live wellness webinars to grow, learn, and connect. Sign up for our newsletter or visit Wisconsin Wellness Podcast to register. Until next time, stay well, Wisconsin.